A bipartisan group of senators, did you catch that part? Bipartisan group of senators met in Washington yesterday to discuss possible gun safety legislation. Any new federal law would be a major breakthrough, from Columbine to Sandy Hook to Parkland. We already know these stories. The conversation remains the same. Something everybody says must be done in the wake of these terrible tragedies. But Congress has yet to find common ground. And there have been no major changes to gun ownership laws in this country. Doug Heye is a former communications director for the Republican National Committee. He served as deputy chief of staff for former House Majority Leader Eric Cantor. We're also joined by, we all know this man, CBS News chief political analyst John Dickerson. We welcome you both to the table. I think we can all agree, Republicans and Democrats agree, they care about children. Everybody gets choked up when they keep talking about what has happened in Uvalde, yet we sit here again. Do you think that things are different this time, Doug?
Well, we've said they're different time and time again, and they haven't been. What tells me that this might be slightly different this time, if not massively different, is that we have a group of senators that's bipartisan that's having conversations. And one of the problems in Washington is, regardless of what the issue is, but certainly when it's something this emotional, is we focus immediately on what the solution is. And it gets very hard in Washington to find the solution. Right now, they're looking at a solution or possible solutions. And that's where, if I'm not completely optimistic, at least have some cautious optimism that we're talking about actual specifics, and it's not the loudest voices in the room that are part of this.
What are the specifics we should focus on, John? Because I think everybody just thinks assault rifles have to go. Good, we're talking about background checks. But assault rifles to civilians who don't have formal training, why is that so hard?
That's not even on the table, and that table's not even in the room. So, and also, by the way, even if it were on the table, you'd have an immediate debate about what an assault weapon is. But let's back up and what's actually being discussed, which is some federal legislation that would nudge states. So again, it's not federal legislation that would do something, but that would get states in a position to have red flag laws, which are essentially, if you know somebody is talking about doing harm in school, you can get a court order to get their guns taken away from them. There are some states that already have this, Indiana, Virginia, others, and so there is some bipartisan support around that. But the key thing to remember here, you need 60 votes in the Senate to get anything done, because the filibuster means you need 60 votes. So if you're Democrats and you can get all of your 50 members aligned, which is also not certain, you then need to find 10 Republicans to get anything passed. Anything that's going to get 10 Republicans is not going to be anything close to what you're talking about in terms of assault weapons, raising the age for ownership of guns, and putting any kind of measures in that people want on the left.
How is Congress so far away from what the polls say the American people are? I mean, the polls say 90% of Americans want some form of gun reform. A Pew poll says that 54% of Americans want stricter laws for gun sales. Where's the disconnect?
Well, there's no member of Congress, there's no senator that represents 90% of the voters. They represent their state, and Vermont and Montana and California and North Carolina are all very different from each other. And you get in states like California and North Carolina where they have a lot of congressional districts. Those districts are different from each other. And those members, Congress very accurately reflects their voters. If you talk to a specific member of Congress, they're representing their district probably pretty well on issues like this.
And the key point is representing their district. The NRA spends a lot of money supporting politicians, but that money is related to the feeling of the people in the district. So it's not just dollar bills. It's also the power of the voters in those districts. Now, the NRA has been very successful over the years in knitting together cultural identity and gun ownership so that people feel it's not just about guns anymore, it's about their entire way of life. And that is a relationship between the NRA and voters, but it's not just about money.
That was to John's point, that's not about lobbying. That's about voter contact. It's who Republican members of Congress hear from when they go home. It's who they hear from on the campaign trail. It's not lobbying.
Yeah, so you can get these big poll numbers, but it really depends on the specific states. And so they're reacting to what their constituents are saying.
That's right. If that sentiment of 90% doesn't exist in at least 40 states to get you past the threshold in the Senate, you're not going to get any legislation.
What about, we saw a recent report that Senate Minority Leader, Mitch McConnell, has said, let's start talking, let's find some common ground. How important will that be? Because it seems like nothing gets done with Republicans in the Senate unless Mitch McConnell's on board.
Look, he's the leader for a reason, and he's the first person that his members are going to look to follow. I'm very encouraged that John Cornyn is part of this process, not just because he's from Texas and is seeing what's happening on the ground, but he's one of the real kind of legislative leaders. He's not what we call a bomb thrower in the Republican caucus. And one of my disappointments with Donald Trump, of which as a Republican there were many, is I believe that Donald Trump could have cut the deal on guns and even on immigration that a President Jeb Bush or President Scott Walker wouldn't have been allowed to by the base.
He said he wanted to, though, Doug. He said he wanted to.
Yeah, and if you're if you're the great deal maker, if you're the great deal maker, you could have and should have been able to do it, and we'd be talking about a very different political context, not just with what happened this week, but what's happening in Houston this weekend.
So why didn't he quickly?
He's never moved his base anywhere. He's been so beholden to his base, which we've seen in these primaries is really about a third of the party.
Do you think it's tone deaf for the NRA to be having their convention in Texas at this particular time?
I think it's really bad timing. There's so much planning that goes into these, and if you're a mayor, it's a Democratic mayor in Houston, you don't want to lose those jobs that are coming in for hotels and restaurants and all these businesses that have been empty.
They should try telling that to the 19 families.
If past his prologue, the speeches from the NRA convention will be very fiery, and they will be you are under attack. They're coming after your guns.
And gun sales will go up.
Yeah.
That also happens. We thank you both. It's good to see you in person. John Dickerson, great to have you at the table.